Thank you for coming back. And again, right now, The Witch's Cauldron, I am doing a series on the history of tequila and mezcal. And in the previous video, I was talking about how the tequila industry had hundreds of years over the mezcal industry, at least, in the legal sense, and at least in the formation, and at least on how they are structured. So, however, in 1911, basically nobody was allowed to produce any type of beverage because there was a prohibition in Mexico. And unfortunately, that prohibition led into putting salt in the where they would grow agave, specifically in the region of Durango, which of course was a huge setback ecologically speaking and also production wise. But needless to say, prohibition does not last long. A lot of people always enjoy a drink and they open up more when they have a fermented beverage or a distilled beverage. And this has happened for many centuries in human history, but I'm guessing that's a story for another day. In 1930, tequila actually starts to be bottled. And it starts to go its way towards our neighbor, which is the United States of America. And they would take it in barrels, which actually led to the aged tequila production. And in 1977, the rules of tequila started to actually be formed in the sense that they decided that only tequila Weber was going to be used for the tequila production. And if some of you have been lucky enough to taste Raicilla or Tusca, you will know that those agaves from the region of the Bajío region are so rich and wonderful in flavor that it was actually a loss in the case of the tequila production, which led to so many other problems along the industry. So they started to do monocultures. They started to only plant tequilana. I mean, there were some people that were rebellious enough to keep their plantations of other agave species like the Rodacanta or like the Inaquidens or like the Lopanta. And again, those are still being used in the production of Raicilla and Tusca. And also some other sets of rules were started to be implemented. One of them was that you had to ferment in stainless steel. Really, it became a thing to do, not to use wild yeast, which in my case and in my palate world, that led into a huge loss in flavor because they started to use the yeast for champagne, just so they could all taste the same. Also, what other sets of rules? So basically, you could not use the tahona, that is the Egyptian wheel, unless you had had it before and you had been using it previous to the law. So any new producers of tequila had to follow these sets of rules, which meant that all those people, they had to follow whatever was edicted. And I think that the industry of tequila kind of lost that artisanal sense. That I remember when I was a kid, my dad would always make me taste tequila a little bit. Of course, I was not of legal age to drink, and he would only give me a taste just so I could know what a good alcohol beverage was and what a bad one was. and I remember the taste of tequila, and when I was of legal age to drink, it wasn't the same taste. Actually, it was not even the same bodily feeling. And I think that unfortunately that's what drove the tequila industry in to the crisis that it lived during the 90s, which I explained before. It had to do with the monocultures and how using clone plants led to you know led to almost the extinction of Tequilana Azul. And in parallel, the mezcal industry, well, it started to exist as it existed for many, many years, which was people making their mezcal with their traditions, and also using all varietals or the varietals that they could find, using wild agaves. And actually, in some cases of Oaxaca, a lot of tequila producers started to ask the agave producers from Oaxaca to start planting tequilana, and some of them refused, some of them accepted it. However, like I told you, the tequila plant is a hybrid of angustifolia that was taken back to Oaxaca, and of course, all these intricacies will differentiate in flavor, because we can talk about terroir and we can talk about species when we talk about tequila and mezcal. If you are aficionado of tequila, you will always feel the difference between tequila from Los Altos and a tequila from the valleys, because of the way that the agave grows and the sun that it receives. And this will play a huge role in the flavors that you will eventually have. And of course, when you go from region to region in Mexico, you have more humidity, less humidity, more sun, more slopes, different types of soil. And that's what makes the world of mezcal so, so vast and so interesting. So, in this new set of rules in the world of tequila, that's when you find the gaps, or the huge gaps between the tequila industry and the mezcal industry, in the sense that the tequila industry started to be more industrialized. They started to use autoclaves to cook the agave. So instead of roasting the agave for 4 days or 5 days or however long it would take, and in a roasted oven using rocks and using the ancestral ways of cooking agave, they started to use autoclaves that would cook the agave in some cases in 6 hours, in good cases 48 hours, depending on the producer. And at the end, this relates to flavor. Also, there was a process that started to happen in the tequila industry, which was to grab the heart and to get all the juices out, cook them, then ferment them, then distill them. And in the next video, I am going to explain to you the process of making tequila and mezcal. However, these differences relate to flavor, the different type of still. For example, in the case of mezcal, you have the Philippine still, you have the conic still, you have the alambic. And in the case of tequila, you want to have a very neat flavor, and you want to have this very sharp flavor, I would call it. And they started to use column stills, and these column stills are basically used to make vodka. And of course, I mean, you would have chemists that they would choose the flavor of which flavors they wanted to accentuate, and those are the really good chemists that made a wonderful profile in some of the tequilas. However, you don't have the complexity of flavors that you would have in a mezcal. You can like it, you cannot like it. It really depends on your palate. It really depends on what you prefer in flavor. In my case, I am very into complex flavors. And I'm going to talk about the production of mezcal in the next video. So thank you for watching.